Hello, everyone. We've got a very, very busy session today. So it's lovely to see loads of familiar names in here and lots of people we haven't met before. By way of quick introduction, my name is Nick. I'm the CEO and founder of Edify. We're a UK-based AI skills training company. Of course, we're not the main star today. You're all here to hear from our friends and partners at WPP, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. If you haven't done so already, click the link that I've just shared in the chat to the Menti or scan that QR code on the screen. And we're just going to take your opinion kind of before we jump into kind of the meat of today's sessions, hopefully really help set the scene. By way of kind of more formal introduction, my background is in learning and development. It's the thing that I'm probably the most passionate about. I've spent 2 decades of my career working in L&D, which kind of led me to form Edify, because of what I'm seeing with generative AI and specifically in the agency world is this huge kind of quite potential threat of disruption to the traditional agency operating models, but also in our work that we're doing really trying to position that threat as a huge opportunity and really looking for ways to leverage this bleeding edge technology to deliver things better and faster and smarter and to really kind of change the way agencies work with clients in helping them think about how they can create value in that pool and how they work together around data and so forth. So that's really the topic that we're going to be exploring here today, but really looking at it through kind of a learning and development lens and really thinking about, when you kind of cut through all that hype, and you're rolling out all these amazing tools and these amazing platforms, and you're encouraging everyone to innovate with it, how do you actually educate people to make sure that they are adopting it and actually utilizing that technology? So we started with a very broad question, Jeb, just kind of how generative AI is changing agencies. We didn't get a huge amount of responses into it, but some that really jump out at me here is like what clients expect from services. That is a huge one. There's been a lot of news recently, in some agency groups, particularly if you work in an agency where you're selling, maybe time for money for creative services. And generative AI is really making advances there. Really difficult to differentiate yourself. The way leaders need to work is, of course, a big one. Strategic ones right through to downstream integration and handling workloads. It's a great opportunity there to handle workloads and potentially get work done in different ways. But really having that ability to think about what are the tasks that you need to keep. So come back to this later if you have any other thoughts. Feel free again to click that Menti. We'll take a look at that towards the end of the session. But it is without further ado, I do want to introduce our two wonderful guests who we've got with us today. So we're very fortunate to be joined. I'm going to introduce Stephanie first, who's on the right. Stephanie, hello. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been working with Steph and her team in the global group at WPP level. She's one of the learning and development directors there in the group to roll out educational training for leaders, both in that centralized group, but also across many of the different sub-agencies globally. So Steph, lovely to have you with us. And we're joined by Holly,
Hi, everyone.
who's joining us very early. She's based in the US. She's the global CLO for Burson Group, of course, one of the largest WPP agencies. And we've been working with Holly quite extensively as well, taking some of that kind of global strategy, but thinking about it in a much more kind of applied way across Burson Group into some very specific pockets and functions within Burson. So for anyone who doesn't know who WPP is, I think you probably know these stats. Huge kind of conglomerate of agency groups. You recognize many of the brands, I'm sure, along the bottom there. Global revenue of nearly 15 billion pounds, 100,000 employees operating in 100 different countries, way more than 100 companies, I think. And then for the subsidiaries, we have Burson, of course, also a huge group themselves operating across 40 markets with over 6,000 employees. And I mean, everyone here, I'm sure, has seen the news. WPP investing really heavily into generative AI, really hedging their bets on it. Rolling out loads of fantastic stuff through the WPP Open platform, acquiring lots of kind of AI startups, really investing in generative AI. But seeing a big opportunity here, I guess, as part of like educating people, not just from the kind of standard, this is how you use the tools, but also from kind of a change management perspective of how do we actually get people to reimagine the way that work is done. And I don't want to talk too much about us, but WPP came to us about a year ago with this really specific challenge. We're deploying these tools. We need to drive adoption of them. We need to educate people about responsible, ethical AI use, but also get them excited about it to turn some of that fear into curiosity. And that led us to develop an AI for Executives program, which we rolled out across the group. And then we've worked extensively with Burson and Hogarth, another one of the WPP agencies. We've trained over 200 leaders in the group now and had some really fantastic results in that. The key one for me is the last one you see on the slide here, that 100% of those 200 plus people that have been through the programs are actually more confident with generative AI. So that's kind of the work that we've done, and that's what we're here to celebrate. But I don't want to do all the talking today. This is, of course, a platform here for Holly and Steph to share some of their learning. So we do have Q&A live during the session. So if you've got any questions, use that Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll pick those up at the end. We've got some here that we pre-baked. So shall we jump straight into it? Steph and Holly?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Add
Yeah.
to that. So awesome. So I think this is probably the big question on everyone's mind, and really the subject of today's webinar, but AI is changing really fast. Kind of how do you ensure people are being kept up to speed? Particularly when it's really difficult to keep up to speed yourself. Steph, why don't you tackle this firstly from a group level?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I mean, I think the key word there is actually the word everybody. From the center, I think that's very much our role. It's around the democratization of our learning to give everybody access, allow people to have an understanding. So we created our own homegrown content. I mean, there's different streams, but one kind of avenue is we created our own homegrown content that really looks at learning around AI and kind of three pillars, if you will, or three different pathways. And the first really centers around, I suppose, AI context, kind of learning the landscape, learning about AI. You spoke about WPP's tool. So, actually being able to go into WPP Open and actually access it and play with it. Our next kind of tier would be making sure that everybody has an understanding to actual application. So actually then going in and taking it a little bit further. And this looks at like use cases and prompt engineering. And also I think, Nick, probably our Edify partnership would sit there, in terms of actually applying. So it's very much that exploratory to application. And then we've got a mastery level, which is, I think taking people further on the journey. You obviously have your early adopters, but that's looking at mastery, our AI accelerator, even, building agents. And I'm sure there'll be a bigger build in that as well. So that's very much a homegrown, democratized kind of engine. Relevancy, yes, you're right. We continuously have to update that. It's and we are lean teams. So, that's quite a task as well to make sure those materials are up to date. We have a different framework, which is the one that I'm kind of probably more involved with, which is Future Readiness Academies. And what we've done there, just from an AI perspective, is taken, like in the old days, we used to have digital marketing as a new concept, and we all kind of had it as a bolt-on to our marketing mix. We found very similar with AI. It was like over there and not in our actual work and in our actual learning. So what we've done with that context is brought in AI content into those learning pathways. So if the topic is even data and insights or, digital marketing or Power BI, we've brought an AI application into those pathways. And then I think the last one is just, everybody up to speed, I suppose, in the agencies. There's capability that's been built out in specific programs that is actually run by the agency. So it's a mix, but we definitely from the center have to make sure that there's that access to the democratized and the relevancy coming out from the center.
Brilliant. Some fantastic stuff that we've obviously been involved in a small way, but there are loads of different kind of partnerships and internal and external kind of vendors working on that and deploying that across the group. Holly, like working more at an agency level, obviously it's great to have the stuff from Central, but it's only a little bit. We obviously decided to work further with us. Do you want to talk us through kind of some of that and for Burson?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great to be part of WPP because what we can then do is take advantage of all of that and then customize and make it appropriate for our audience. It's funny when we were going through this and I was preparing and I looked at this question again, how do you ensure everyone is being kept up to speed? My first thought was, well, don't assume that you alone can do this because
Yeah.
there's so much happening. It's impossible, right? We can't ensure everybody's being kept up to speed all the time. We can do as much as we can. So I think it's moving faster than any one person or group or team can keep track of. And for that reason, I think the approach has been somewhat organic. I partner very closely with our innovation team and our internal comms team to figure out this multi-pronged, push, right? And so the innovation team's got stuff going on. My team steps in to support like a light L&D touch to that. We also supplemented what Steph and her team are doing. We supplemented with very PR specific use cases, and we developed something called AI hacks. And they were just little teeny micro learnings with use cases that we would post on the LMS as literally like 2 minute, maybe 2 to 3 minute micro learnings. There's also been just Teams chats bubbling up and organically people get added. There's a chat, that's actually a very robust chat in EMEA that people are getting added to all the time. And it's sort of like let those things proliferate. And I think that really helps because the landscape is too much for any one person to know what's going on. And I think, yeah, certainly we'll get into more specifics about how we partnered with Edify on some of the work. But yeah, it's kind of just try to do as much as you can do, stay on top of it to the extent you can, be nimble. I think that's the key in this.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Like you don't know what you don't know, but it's also moving so fast. You need to learn to
Yeah.
learn. And sparking curiosity, I think, is just a big part of it. I think when people use these tools properly for the first time, it's almost a bit addictive. They're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize I could do this. And then it starts to drive that momentum.
Yeah.
People just keep learning. They kind of get into it.
And maybe to add to that, I think also, what Holly shared also is shared back. So, what the agencies are then doing is there's cross collaboration, and not necessarily that every agency then picks up what other agencies are doing, but we're able to then see what works and what we can then apply, and what where we can collaborate, or where other agencies can pick up bits and pieces from each other. So Charlie's point is very much this symbiotic kind of ecosystem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
feeding back and forth. Awesome.
yeah,
This is one that we come up a lot. I come up against a lot at Edify. We work with many, many different companies, including a lot of agencies. But what you're seeing, this kind of skills gap, we've kind of alluded to it already. Maybe Holly, if you want to go a little bit deeper on this, like looking at it at the Burson level, and we've worked with various teams within Burson, including finance and HR and the learning and development team. What do you think the skills are that people should be developing kind of right now?
Yeah, I think there's so many different skills. I think really important is what you've already referenced is experimentation and curiosity. I think that that's huge because it is somewhat intuitive once you get into it. So you've got to have that open-mindedness, kind of the growth mindset, the willingness to share and tinker with it, right? I think a lot of times in our sessions, we would tell people, look, you can't break it. So don't be afraid, just go in. So I think that's a broad kind of mindset, skill set that we try to put out there. I think within that, there's a real range from tactical to strategic. So prompting is still really, it's a basic skill within AI, but I think it's so important. And the framework I know that Edify that you use has been really helpful in terms of helping people prompt the tool in a way that's going to yield more valuable information and keep things going. So I think when I think about it, I think of three levels. There's like, how do you use it, right? That's sort of guides, use cases, tips and tricks, little e-learnings. Here's a framework for how to prompt, all of that stuff is sort of at the basic tactical, how do you use all of these tools? And that does change all the time and it's new and it's happening every time, all the time. I think moving up from there, we have the why. And that is sort of what's the value add to our clients? How does this improve your own personal productivity? How do we continue to get the most out of the tools? The more we put in, the smarter they're going to get, right? So there's kind of the how and the why. And then I think we get to where we're just starting. I think the conversation is just getting into so what? What can we learn about the future of work, the future of our profession, who we are as humans? I think when we think about digital transformation, it's going from the tactical to the strategic is really important. And a lot of that really requires thinking differently about, we can't just take business process the way it's been done and put it into AI and just expect to have a speeded up situation. That's not the recipe to win in the market. I think what we need to do is really think about how might we redesign workflows in order to propel and accelerate everything going forward. So just getting there, because this is also overwhelming, but that's kind of the trajectory I see.
Yeah, there's a fantastic example I love drawing on history from this, but it's around the electrification of factories in New York in the in the early 1900s, where Thomas Edison, one of his many inventions was kind of these electrical engines. At the time, they were powered with coal and steam. Many factories just took that centralized engine, that power source out and just put an electric source in, but saw no productivity boost. Because they didn't realize that, of course, one of the benefits of electricity is they could run power out to individual workstations. They had to fundamentally rethink and redesign the way that the factory operated. And it took nearly 30 years for them to actually realize the benefits of electricity required a completely different mindset to this. You couldn't just plug it in and expect things to happen. You expect this kind of boost. You kind of need to rethink it.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Really good.
Um, you also mentioned there a little bit, Holly, and I think this is maybe an interesting thing to look at, but many organizations, this is kind of a bit of a maturity framework that we use at Edify, but I think it's a good, if you want to take a screenshot in this webinar and take this back to your teams or whatever, it might be a good starting point for the conversation. But when you look at all layers of an organization, from leadership right down into kind of operational teams, so HR, finance, client services, so forth, and then of course technical teams, so product and software developers and so forth, really thinking about where you are on that journey. That core kind of AI literacy, the ability to prompt for your job, chain of thought reasoning, really simple kind of agentic workflows. They're really just kind of like learning or exploring AI is probably where most businesses realistically are still at, let alone kind of moving into the application phase, which is really about, starting to change the way of working, starting to think about, if there's agents in my team as a manager, like how would I manage the agents alongside with human capital, like that kind of discussion. And then of course the transforming piece, which is coming very, very quickly for us, but like how do we become an AI first organization? And how, what is the factory that we're building going to look like? That might be complete metamorphosis from the way that we're operating right now. Great. Here's a question for you, Steph. So obviously, WP is a huge, massively diverse group of agencies, many different types of agencies and different operating models for those agencies. How can you balance that centralized L&D strategy to the specific needs of the agencies?
Yeah. It's tough, and I think as Holly said there earlier, and her other answer, we can't do it all. So I think for us, we try, I think, from a central perspective to solve common need, so across the agencies, rather than trying to solve everything, right? So the focus for us is really around solving kind of that common need. And part of that, I think, has been obviously the framework that we developed with AI, like I referred to in the beginning. But also then we're quite unique in the sense that we have a great relationship with the likes of Holly and our other global L&Ds and L&Ds of market. So there's a very much a consultative, collaborative approach. I kind of alluded to it earlier, where we're able to cross-share and pollinate. And so we kind of, from the sense, I suppose, are providing this central solution, but then also diving in and kind of having the dialogue with the agencies, and then the capability and the kind of detailed discussion then happens in the agencies. So, we knew that there was a little bit more work to be done from a leadership perspective. I mean, that's the case study you spoke to in terms of, AI fluency at our leadership level. We spoke to the likes of you, we've got some other partners, and kind of brought that into the mix. And then we don't just say to the agencies, roll this out. We have the dialogue, we have the conversation. We say, for those of you, we've kind of vetted Edify, we've had sessions, we feel like there's something of value here. And then the likes of the agencies, that Burson, Hogarth, for example, have picked that up and kind of worked a little bit harder within their agencies to not only move, I think, the dial there that you had on the previous slide from kind of, what was it, the exploratory stage kind of to that transformation, but just, that's exactly it. They're like taking that leaders to understand, the cultural intent and kind of take it further. I'm sure Holly can speak a little bit more to kind of how they're doing that. But yeah, I think that's the balance, Nick, because I think otherwise, we're going to, and it's difficult. I think in a personal space, you tip into that space and you're like, oh no, back into this role because you're trying to solve, but actually our role is really much around solving that common need.
Sure.
Holly, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in. And it is a really collaborative experience and partnership, which is great. I remember when, excuse me, when Edify was first introduced, and I think you all did a session live in London, which I was like, oh, I can't be there. I'm in New York. But I remember hearing about it and hearing people say, yeah, we talked about Beyonce. And I thought, this sounds fun and engaging. I'm like, I need to know about this. So fast forward, WPP made available a few sessions, and I just said, oh, I grab one of those up, and we put the first ones, I think we used it for our GCL, our Global Client Lead community. And it went so well. And our chief client officer had been there. She talked about it in our Burson leadership team meeting, and then everybody got excited. And so we ended up, our chief finance officer did one for his leadership team. And it was really cool because when we partnered with Edify, we could customize. So we had somebody for the finance team. It was certainly, obviously, people with deep knowledge of AI, but also with a finance, background and lens on things. Fast forward, we also did that with our people leadership team. And then I was thrilled to be able to do a 6-week deep dive into L&D. So AI applied to L&D for our extended team across globally across Burson. And that was fantastic because we came out of it kind of buzzing, and application happened right away.
I was about to say, we've seen the fruit of that already because
you have, great, yes.
Yeah,
the creation of agents and all of that stuff. So it's been really fun. Yeah, I would say there was a number of examples, but one coming out of that was the creation of an agent to kind of like the person on my team who manages our LMS and sort of fields questions and helps all of the admins globally do what they need to do in there. She just built an agent, and that people can go to the agent and ask it a question. And that way they're not coming to her with everything. And it's smart and it does what it needs to do. And she can continually, continue to add information to train the agent so that keeps people current. So it's been a lot of fun, and it's been really impactful.
And again, I'm going to jump in just to say, talking again about the collaboration. So then this member of Holly's team then shared on our learning collective around, what she had done. And I'm like, but hang on, we need to take this back to all the other agencies because many of us are on the same platform. So we can use that agent across, or could we at least, look at using that agent across the agencies and at the center. So that's what I meant by that share and that collaboration, kind of sharing use cases, success stories, learning from each other and adapting. And I think that's where a lot of the value sits, because otherwise you're very much in your own space, your own little box, and we're really trying to break that open.
Yeah.
Yep.
That actually ties in. Actually, a question came in just before from one of the participants around like how you identify use cases across teams. Is there any specific frameworks that you follow for identifying them, like collating, so you mentioned this before, Steph, within the kind of the learning collective piece.
Yeah.
Any other kind of ways that you've been able to share use cases across the business?
I mean, it's not always easy. My colleague who's really, pioneering in that space, I think at times wants to pull her hair out because it is very specific to very specific teams, and she's trying to kind of get that out there. So I think it's very much a case of asking, and then people putting up their hand and being encouraged to kind of share it. So it's using, the network and, through the agencies and the success stories and like this kind of idea. I think that's really it. That's the secret sauce at this stage. I don't think there's much more than that. I think that use case though has a lot of value. We can do a lot more there, but it is reliant on getting the goods, from various teams. Because otherwise, there's a lot of people doing amazing things, but we don't see it and we can't surface it and we can't share it. Yeah.
I think also sometimes it's very important to share the success stories, but also the failures
Mm,
where things have
mm,
not worked.
mm.
Because I think you can learn a lot from that as well. Certainly that was
Yeah.
something I experienced a lot in kind of the digital.
And there's also like internal competitions and things like that, which kind of heroes work. And, so that, like you said, that's all the success stuff, but that's also an opportunity where you kind of saying, oh my word, I didn't know you could do that. Or that's amazing. That can't be like,
Yeah.
yeah. So those are kind of the platforms.
We had another question actually come in, which actually ties quite nicely into this question. I'm going to try and link the kind of two together. This whole argument, do we drive top down? Do we go grassroots, kind of bottom up? And Imran asked a question in the chat about like that, like particularly at the leadership level, how do you transfer those skills to support, well, how do you use like education to support the impact of leaders and teams, but the way they also collaborate internally with customers? So I think there's kind of two bits to this question. Top down, bottom up is probably the first piece, but then how do you ensure that is actually supporting the needs of the clients and you're not just sort of banked in the bureaucracy of yourself?
Holly, do you want to go?
Sorry, go Holly, I
Uh,
think.
oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is both, right? You need both top down and bottom up. I think with something this vast and, multifaceted, you can't, it's not something you're gonna necessarily control, or do you want to control? You want to have it be, proliferating on its own. That being said, I think certainly from the WPP level, there were goals for adoption that each agency was striving towards. And so that gives you a very clear, okay, we have to do this, we're being measured on it, et cetera, let's go. So that makes a lot of sense. And I recall kind of early on when all of this was happening, it was something as simple as each member of the Burson leadership team sending a note to their teams saying, I expect you to log in to WPP Open and play around and do some stuff and report back to me and let me know what you did. That's pretty simple, but that did start things going. We also had kind of a leader-led learning going on. So this is in my partnership with the innovation team. They had put together a future of work initiative and really kind of gave free rein to various leaders across in each region to come up with, run some demos on whatever you want. Pick a use case that you have done and run a little demo session and invite everybody from the agency, from your region, from your area. And those really got conversation going, and those drove up our numbers too. So it's both. And then I think what we've seen, which has been kind of amazing, we've touched a little bit on agents, and I was just pulling up the numbers that I saw yesterday. This year at Burson, there have been over 4,300 agents created, which is
Wow.
incredible. So everybody's like, oh, we can do something with this, which is great. And the unique number of employees that have been created, at least one agent is 960. So that's interesting, right? It's like, okay, there's things happening, people are doing stuff. At the same time, the innovation team is saying, okay, but we also need to have some governance. And so they've created a document about like what can be used as an agent, how do you use it, how do you build it, all of that. And so there's some guidelines for how to maybe put some guardrails along. I don't, yeah, that's I'll just leave it at that. But I think it's a both and, right? It's allowing things to proliferate, but then also saying, okay, where do we go? Which ones are we going to publish on our channels? And which ones are people just going to use on their own? So yeah, that's where it's at.
Cool. There's another question that just came in, I think I'd like to pick up, but this idea of experimentation and curiosity is great, but kind of what comes next, particularly when everyone's at such disparately different stages of their journey. We find, particularly as you go up the chain, they're even less kind of like hands-on with it because they're just naturally more busy, like
Yep.
in for leaders, sometimes that like kind of blows their mind because again, they just have time. So what comes kind of after kind of curiosity and experimentation? Is there anything that you've seen working particularly
I
well?
mean, I have one word, and I think Holly, again, you're probably the best person to expand. I'm putting you on the spot here, but I think like the cultural and the change, you know what I mean? Like once you've played with it, like you can't just stay, even if you've adapted a little bit of your workflow, like there's got to be this like change in like, the way we think, the way we do, the cultural kind of the change management piece.
Yep.
I mean, I can't articulate it well, but something there, I think that's
Yeah.
what we're
I mean,
talking about at the moment.
yeah, sorry to cut you off. The words that are coming to my mind are focus and alignment. And I
Mm.
think that
Yeah.
yes, we're looking at obviously 2026 is around the corner now, and part of our plans are to begin to focus in and say,
Mm.
okay,
Yeah.
with all of this newfound bubbling, interest, and it is time to get focused and figure out where does this line up with our business goals. It kind of reminds me of how we do L&D planning, right? You figure out what's the business goal, what are the strategies, how does L&D come in and support? It's the same kind of a thing, right? How do we figure out where AI, where do we want to lean in? Is it all, this crazy number of agents? Do we pick a few? At Burson, we have a few proprietary tools that are powered by AI. And so that's also another direction that it's not just using Chat GPT or whatnot. It's embedding them into things like I think we have a eight sorry, I'm losing my words. PR, like a press release builder kind of a thing, right? And so how does it begin to get much more focused into the business and where we're going? But yeah, I think what's challenging and exciting at the same time about that is that we've never been here before. So it's it does require a bit of time to pull back and stop and
Mhm.
think and then go forward.
Mhm.
And everybody knows everybody's running around like crazy. So getting people to slow down and do that can be a challenge. But I do think it's on the radar for our leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think part of that is also like what I was alluding there to in terms of change and the culture thing is part of that pause, like pausing and
Yes.
actually understanding that impact and like what does that mean? Okay, so we hear
Yes.
about like more time, but is it really more time? And what does that mean culturally? And how do we apply that? And so Nick, those are things we can't
Yeah.
answer, but I think that's
Yeah, it's
part
a
of
bit
the
of
dialogue.
the kind of
Where
the
it's going.
to go
Yeah.
fast kind of thing. Like
Mm.
because everyone's just so busy like in their day jobs that sometimes you have the
Yeah.
ability to step back for a day to actually discuss this and to strategize around it and to kind of level set. There's another question that came through during that, I think, but it's also probably worth picking up here, but at like the leadership level. So we mentioned kind of change management as one of the big pieces. Are there any other soft skills that you think leaders should be developing? You know, entrepreneurial thinking?
I'll start and then Holly, you can maybe, I mean, I'm going to talk more broadly, but what we have done under Future Readiness Academy's framework is we realize that intersection between AI and human capability. And so we know that, and again, it's common as kind of, throw down in the industry. It's very much around like, our critical thinking and, how do we make sure that that's applied both from that tension point between utilizing AI tools and then, kind of the growth of our people. And if you look at, I can't remember all the papers, but if you look at all the kind of the prediction of skills for 2030, it's all around our human skills, right? So a lot of that from what we've done from the Future Readiness Academies, and again, it's in its infancy, but it's building out some of that. So it's meant to be framed. I think we can probably do a better job, but it's meant to be framed within the context of AI, within this new landscape, how these skills have become important. And I think your leaders need to know that first. I mean, I think there's lots of gaps in many leaders across the board. There's blind spots, and we need to bubble up a lot of those skills so that we are, leading with curiosity and we're leading with kind of humility. And we've got some of these levers that probably were in the background in the old days. Like they're much more at the fore. Our people expect them. So something within that context is what we kind of looking at from a central perspective.
Yeah, I would say that's the same. I mean, I think critical thinking is a really interesting one for me. I remember hearing something about, of course, in the world of PR, writing skills are really essential. It's like knowing how to write. Well, now AI is writing for you, but it's also hallucinating and it's also doing things that, you still
Yeah.
need to be able to check. So the training and the skill set shifts a little bit from actually sitting down and writing the whole document now to, okay, you need to be able to look with a critical eye at what AI has produced and be able to check the work. So that's really interesting. And then that kind of morphs into what is our relationship with these tools? We're essentially becoming managers of AI.
Mhm.
And what does it mean to be a manager of not a human? And what does that mean? And so I think it's really interesting and fascinating. I do agree though that we're not I mean, we're going to still be here on the planet as humans and we have to get along.
Yeah.
To, be with each other. I do think I'm wondering, and this might be a little out there, but I wonder whether we humans are going to really be humbled by AI because we've been, king of the hill for so long and like the smartest people on the block, and it's like, or species. And I keep thinking about whether this is sort of a servant leadership type model where
Interesting.
We are sort of in order to be leading in this world, we have to be servants to the AI. So it's kind of crazy to think about, but I think worth thinking about for sure.
Very big existential thought to land on.
I know. And it's early in the morning here.
That's why.
It's the paper factimizer for anyone that's familiar with that paper that was written a few years ago. But we can take that one offline. We're going to wrap up quite quickly here, and please keep the questions coming in if you've got them. But what's your kind of main piece of advice for, we've got a lot of learning leaders in the session today. They're dealing with the same challenges that you're coming up against. Like, what would you say? Steph, do you want to go first here?
I think leverage or utilize Edify. No, I mean, obviously that's part of the mix, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really about having an approach, and that approach might change, and you're really starting something, kind of get in there, get just your teeth stuck in, having your approach and then evolving that approach in an iterative process. So looking at the shorter term, then what comes next. I think a lot of us are still, I've been in a lot of industry meetings, around tables, and it's very much like you said at the beginning, like we all kind of seem to be in the same place, and it's okay, and we can have those kind of discussions, but then you take it a little bit further and kind of put those action steps against that approach and collaboration. I mean, that's a theme we've spoken a lot to today. It's not something you can do on your own, as Honey said. So yeah, maybe not really a winning answer, but I think it's a lot more practical, it's practicalities really.
Kind of get stuck in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You,
Mm.
Holly, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with all of it, and I would add celebrate the small wins,
Nice.
because it is so big and massive, and the tiniest thing is something to celebrate as we're all
Mm,
kind of going along on this learning journey because it's a big old learning journey. I think creating space and time for the application and the shared experience.
mm,
Not just, presentations or like, here's the latest article. That has a time and place, and I think that's valuable. But I think the where learning really flourishes is when people are playing and experimenting together and figuring things out. I think that accelerates or changes tenor a little bit when we get into the transformation piece, which is where teams need to do teaming in a way that understands and appreciates AI and kind of incorporates it. So I think it's yeah, creating those containers, which is
mm,
hard. And then I think for it's L&D is not always the easiest place to be because you do have to be both responding in the moment and thinking ahead. Um, and sort of trying to like, I don't know, the train is hurtling down the tracks, and how do you get in there? But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Cool.
And equally, I think, just attending things like this, if there's no kind of learning and you're battling to open up, I think some of those channels internally, I think you can also learn outside in. So I've dialed up, although sometimes, we're busy and we don't always have time to get out, but I've dialed up some of those industry conversations because again, that's an opportunity where you can kind of cross share and you can be vulnerable, and you can ask questions. So yeah, I think it's a combination. It's a combination of things, Nick.
Very, very, yeah, very sage advice, but kind of just do it. Just deal.
Yeah, you got to get in there.
Get
Yeah,
that
exactly.
going. Awesome. If you do want to find out anything more about anything we've discussed today, or our work with WPP, or you want the Create framework, that is our prompting thing, or other resources like that, just feel free to scan the form on the screen, click the link in the chat. When someone from the Edify team will reach back out to you and share that with you. I don't think we've really got any other questions that have come through. I think that's kind of covered it off. We might give it a minute or two, but Holly and Steph, thank you so much. Not just for
Pleasure.
joining us for today, but for kind of your continued partnership. I know we've got a lot more work together to do together in 2026. So I know that the
Yeah,
team is very excited about that. But
look
really appreciate
forward.
the time today. And yeah, unless there's any other kind of burning questions coming through, we might wrap things up there. Or any other kind of comments, Holly or Steph, you want to make before we close it off?
No, thanks for a
Mm,
great conversation.
Right.
Yeah,
Lots
very
of
good. I
thanks.
hope there's some levers in that for everybody to take away. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, and thank you everyone who
Thank
joined us
you.
today. Best of luck.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.